This week on Quality Digest Live, we examine whether modern cities can be considered Muda, or waste.
Or waste. Plus, there's a people problem in quality improvement, but not the one you think. We'll explain when we come back.
Welcome back to Quality Digest Live for December 14th, 2012. QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making news in the world of quality. I'm Dirk Ducharme, Editor-in-Chief of Quality Digest.
And I'm Quality Digest publisher Mike Richmond. We're going to start the show this week with a quick but important news item from the American Society for Quality. The annual ASQ salary survey was released earlier this month, and according to the survey, for the first time in more than 25 years, salaries for quality professionals were flat from 2011 to 2012.
Yeah, not too surprising.
Not too surprising. In recent years, salary increases for quality professionals haven't been large. They've averaged a bit more than 2% per year from 2008 to 2011, but they've been there. They haven't been large, but they've been there. Right. But not so this year. The most likely explanation is that the lingering effects of the Great Recession and the slower than expected recovery are acting to inhibit salaries. Not surprisingly, better education and the accumulation of professional certifications can help quality professionals maximize their compensation. For example, those with a PhD average about twice the salary of those with a high school diploma or less. Meanwhile, those with 6 certifications or more earn better than $20,000 more per year than their counterparts with 0 certifications. So for more on ASQ's salary survey and all of the pieces that we're going to be covering on today's show, just check out the story links below the player page right there.
Yeah, this is, if you guys haven't ever checked out the salary survey, ASQ has been doing it every year for a long time. Quality Digest used to do it as well back when we were in print, and I'm happy to say that it's actually the results of our salary surveys, both of them, actually coincided quite well. So the data that you're getting from the ASQ on the salary survey is really in line with what is happening in reality out there in the field.
In a lot of ways they cut it up. We just gave a quick one because we have
exactly. Theirs are very in-depth and a much larger sample size too.
Yeah, good sample size, a lot of ways to cut it up. So check that out when you get a chance. And again, story link right there, and you can see where you fit into the story.
That's right. Okay. Well, in a story by Alan Austin this week, Austin examined the idea that problems in the workplace are people problems. Now, as modern quality professionals, we've been taught that it is rarely the people, the ones doing the work. It's the system. Alan has maybe a slightly different slant in his article. Maybe it is the people. So Austin, in his career, spent a lot of time working in Nigeria. Now, Nigeria is a region, as you know, that suffers from corruption and poverty and the ever-present threat of violence from criminals and terrorists. And just to kind of keep abreast of what's going on in Nigeria, Austin still reads one of the Nigerian newspapers, the Vanguard. And recently, he read an article about a business manager of the Gwiwa business unit of the Power Holding Company. This is the electrical company in Nigeria, who was flogged on orders of the governor for failing to provide light to his community. And when we say flogged, we don't mean in the metaphorical sense. We mean literally beaten. Because the light company was failing and things weren't working the way it should, so they took him out and flogged him. So yes, maintaining the electrical grid in Nigeria is fraught with problems, and it isn't just management, it's infrastructure and all that kind of stuff. But does whipping the business manager solve anything? Well, of course, says Austin. Of course not, says Austin. Of course, we all kind of sagely nod our heads in agreement and go, oh, well, of course not. It's not the people, it's the process, it's what we've been taught.
Just like in China, where they, you know, when in China, when you mess up and the boss says, we're going to terminate you.
They sometimes mean that quite literally. A couple years ago, there were a couple of high-profile cases in China where people were literally executed because of something that went wrong with their factories or the processes, and people died as a result. And the Chinese took that quite seriously. But here is something that Austin points out. And he's got this great quote toward the end of his article. The quality intelligentsia, people like W. Edwards Deming and Joseph Duran, tried for years to get us to understand the need to focus on the process rather than the person. Well, how well have we learned the lesson? We blame some politicians for problems that predate their tenure and applaud others for positive results that are the result of initiatives started well before they took office. We react like Pavlov's dogs to whatever the most recent reported value is of some economic indicator of interest. We get angry at the waitstaff for bringing us the wrong dish. We treat common cause variation like it is special, and we understand special cause variation not at all.
Hear, hear.
And Austin says, it is a people problem. Or in the immortal words of Walt Kelly's Pogo, we have met the enemy, and he is us.
That's right.
So what Austin is saying is that, until we take responsibility for our own attitudes, you and me, our own attitudes, and focus on the process to help everyone in our organization to better understand and the process and to be better systems thinkers, we simply won't improve. And it's funny, he points out, it's like, we hear this over and over again. It comes up in our articles all the time. It's not the people, it's the process. It's not the people, it's the process. We kind of understand it up here, but we don't integrate it in our own personal lives. As he points out, we'll blame some politician or applaud some politician for something that happened 2 previous administrations ago.
Right.
It makes no sense, but we want to blame it on somebody, right?
Yeah, it comes down, what I thought when I read this article again, it comes down to, we refer to all the time as Deming's red bead experiment, where the purpose of the red bead experiment is to say it's not the people, it's the process. If you have a faulty process, people are going to draw errors, are going to create errors from the process, not from the quality of their work necessarily. But the people are part of the process. When you have a large edifice of a process or a large organization, there's people involved in that. I'm going to be talking in a minute about cities and about large organizations. Large organizations aren't just things. They're composed of people and processes and work and customers and everything else. But the people part of that is important, and it is controllable. I think one of the things that Alan is saying in his article is whether it's metaphorical or literal, flogging people to get them to do better doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
But people have to take the responsibility and understand that it's them who move the needle and make things work.
And this just dawned on me. We talk about flogging. This is the Christmas season. Everybody stands in line and to get their presents and stuff. And you don't have to do much shopping on Christmas to end up in a line and hear somebody complaining, for lack of a better word, that is, what's going, how come you guys are so slow? How come you didn't, they've got a line 30 people long and stuff's flying off the shelves, and you got this clerk up there, trying to take all these orders, answer questions. And what's the response from a lot of people is like, blame the poor guy behind the counter getting paid minimum wage to ring up your order. It's like, it's not them, dude. And it's just, even though we know better, it's just kind of this natural tendency. We don't want to look at the system. We want to place blame right away.
Sure, but look at it from the other part of it, if I can be a little contrarian here, look at it to say, well, now maybe when there is all that stress and there is a lot of customers who are frustrated, now is the time, we had another article that referred to this week, where you can maybe separate yourself in the minds of your customers, and you can prove through excellent service and patience and working through these issues that you are separated from your competitors. Maybe that's a differentiator as well for people that are in service industries and are serving customers.
Yeah.
So it's everything. It's both. I mean, it's all at the same time. And the moral of the story, I think, from what Alan's talking about is, again, flogging doesn't work, but within that, though, the kernel of truth there is that it is still the people. It is still the people that are going to make your organization work or not. And I think that's really an important message to carry.
Right.
And I'm going to transition now, if it's okay with you.
Sure.
Because I think this is a good leaping off point, because what I want to talk about was a story today about cities and about large organizations.
Very interesting story by Bill Levinson.
Really interesting story by Bill Levinson. Bill is one of our most frequent contributors, as you know, and Bill always has talk about a contrarian viewpoint.
Oh boy, a different way of looking at things.
Always has a very different way of looking at things. Always brings in Henry Ford in some way, and does again at the end of the story. You can rely on that. Bill's story was Large Cities Are Now Muda, and that was by Bill. It appeared in Monday's issue of Quality Digest Daily. And the premise of Bill's story, again, was that cities now are inefficient. Cities are wasteful. Cities are Muda. And he gives a little bit of a history lesson, which of course I always love. He gives a little bit of a history lesson talking about why cities developed and how cities became what they are. And hundreds and hundreds, thousands of years ago, cities were very necessary. You had a situation where you needed to be able to protect your populace by throwing up these huge walls, and people would be safe, in theory, behind these walls. Also, there was a real economic motivator to have all those people together. You had all your customers there, you had all your providers of products and services there in one place. It was a hassle.
Because transportation would take forever to go from one place to another.
It was a hassle to go from a village that was 15 miles outside to bring in pelts or bread or whatever it would be, and to sell it at the market and then have to go back. I mean, that's a major hassle. So economically, it made much more sense to focus on that and have those people all in one place. Well, we know what happened as history progresses. Things change, and walls begin to get breached, and things like airplanes are invented, and all of a sudden, from a defensive position, cities now are not necessarily defensible, and now high-profile targets. And we saw that, sadly, of course, we saw that on 9/11, where New York City was a target. Bill uses the example of not necessarily even terrorism or war. He uses the example of natural disasters. In Hurricane Sandy, which we had a few months ago, New York has been the slowest to recover really from that. And why? Because New York is kind of like a helpless whale thrown on the beach. I mean, they really, New York can't do much for itself. It has to bring its food in, it has to bring its fuel in. It's just an inefficient way to live, maybe, and it's also a rather inefficient way to do business. The costs are enormous to do business in New York City or London or any of these big population centers, right? I mean, you're going to be paying 5, 10, 20 times the amount for rent as you would in some smaller area. And now, with technology, communication technology the way it is, you don't have to be in a centralized location, right? You don't have to be in New York to do business in New York. You can be anywhere in the world and do business in New York, or in London, or in any other place in the world. It doesn't matter. The decentralization is what he's talking about here. We had a number of really good comments on this. Because again, this is an interesting perspective, not one that you hear a lot of, and we had some pushback. There was a couple of great comments. One of them I want to read was from another contributor of ours, Tom Peisdeck, and I'd like to flash it up on the screen now if I could. And Tom refers to a different article, which is linked in his comment. You can read that in the article. A recent article compared the ability to recover from an earthquake in Kobe, Japan, and Los Angeles, California. Perhaps the problem isn't size, but regulations and restrictions, or even deeper problems such as the expectations and attitudes of the citizenry. It's still Muda, but perhaps from a different source. Fair point.
Interesting, yeah.
Interesting comment that yeah, there's Muda in there, there's waste in there, but maybe not the kind of waste that you think. Maybe it's not just the size, maybe it's what the size breeds, the overregulation of that, and the attitudes of the stakeholders. Citizens are like customers or stakeholders. And this is the point I want to make. I know we're getting into this a little deep, but I want to make this point before we go on. That when I read the story, what I thought about was the amazing similarities between large cities and large organizations, right? I mean, this is going to be anathema. This is going to be something that's not going to go over well with some of our readers because this runs counter to the quality mindset. But I think large organizations like that breed waste by their very nature. I think that they're wasteful, and I think that we all say, well, there shouldn't be waste. There should never be waste. Waste should be eliminated out of the organization regardless, and that's the quality mindset. What I'm saying is that inherent in a big city, inherent in a big organization, is going to be waste, and yeah, you don't want it. You want to try to get rid of as much as you can because you want to be efficient, you want to be lean, you want to be profitable as much as you can. But some of that, I think, is necessary. Some of that's necessary. We had another comment talking about, a couple other comments in the story, which I'm not going to run, but you can read them for yourself. One of them talked about cost and kind of chided Bill a little bit for saying, well, Bill, you always say you want to drive all the cost out. Well, some things are worth the cost. Some things you need to have cost to have things that are valuable, right? That's a good point too. And the other thing is the idea that there are some indescribable values to mass. Cities have culture. Cities have art. There's a certain alchemistic thing that happens when you gather people in a city, and cities have personalities, and as do large organizations.
And I believe he actually even acknowledged that, that there are some benefits that come as well.
There are, and I think that looking at this in the big picture, I think that Bill makes some good points. Our commenters made good points too. That Muda is to be eliminated if you can. If you get rid of the waste, you should, and you can, whether it's a city or an organization. But realize that from that overlapping stuff, the responsibilities of people in organizations and people running cities, there are benefits that come from that too.
Right.
And there are things that come out of that are of value and that I think are kind of needed, even though it may run counter to the quality perspective.
Bill's an interesting writer, and he's got actually another very interesting article coming up next week, which, we'll see.
Yeah, look forward to that.
That'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Okay. As all of you know, Quality Digest is one of the partners with the Coordinate Metrology Society, and we got an interesting piece of news and an interview coming up here in a second. The Coordinate Metrology Society recently announced the results of their third large-scale measurement study conducted at the 28th Annual Coordinate Metrology Systems Conference, the CMSC, held in New Orleans just a few months ago. And we've talked about this study and the ongoing efforts of the CMS to create a certification program for portable 3D metrology. These studies that have been done over the past couple of years are part of the data gathering for creating the program. This year's measurement study was developed to support the organization's certification cognitive examination development process, which will culminate in the industry's first Level 1 personnel certification program for portable 3D metrology. The study's main focus was to test the methodology of practical testing rather than the evaluation of the measurement results. So joining us today to tell us a little bit about the study and its result is Keith Bevan, product manager at the National Physical Laboratory in the UK, coming to us via Skype from the UK. Hey, Bill.
Keith.
Keith. The other Bill. Hey, Keith, how are you doing?
Good morning, everybody. How are you?
Pretty good. So Keith, tell us just really briefly, just to set the stage, what the measurement study is about, and then what you discovered this year.
Okay, so this year's measurement study, as you mentioned, was about the importance of practical testing. So we really wanted to contribute to the development of the examination process that the subcommittee of CMSC have been working on, and piloted the exam at this year's conference. So we need to sort of look at the different methods of how we could go about assessing people and looking at their competence. So we had 6 in total different areas where we had different pieces of equipment, which allowed us to do a particular method around that practical testing.
And so there's both a practical testing aspect, and there is also a general knowledge testing as well. Do I have that right?
Yeah, part of the testing that we actually did in the measurement study was to actually look at the way people went about doing a measurement. We sort of tried in from the previous year about behaviours. So we sort of included that in a particular process. So we set up a process for the individuals to take. I mean, there was a whole group of people that were involved in this. And per booth, there was 3 people that were associated to the practical test. There was the person themselves, what we called the participant. There was a person doing observations, and then there was an applications engineer. So between the 3, the idea was to actually go through the practical test. And the participant was the person who would be telling the applications engineer what they wanted them to do. And the observer was using a process to see whether the individual
Keith, you're breaking up a little bit, Keith. We're going to...
Well, you broke up a little bit there, but I think I understood. I'm going to repeat back what I think you were saying, and you can just acknowledge. Sometimes your audio is cutting out because of the Skype connection. But it sounds like what you're saying is the practical test. You had a person who was telling the participant what they wanted them to do. The participant would then try to do that operation, that measurement operation that they were instructed to do, and then they were observed on how well they carried that out. Is that right?
Yeah, I think we lost. I can see that, but I think you're right on that. I think that you have that correct, and this is an evolution of what the CMSC has been doing in this space, because we've been there, and Keith's been there for several years now. Right. And this measurement study has been a big part of what the CMSC has done for several years now, connecting in again to their certification work and leading into this first level 1 certification. And they've done things like looking at the behaviors of users as they take measurements. And really what they're trying to do here is they're trying to understand in the field, in the practical world, what is needed and how they can help address the skill sets, the body knowledge that is needed for metrologists to understand how to use the tools and the equipment of
right, and hopefully we'll be able to get Keith, the Skype, he is coming from the UK and the Skype connection wasn't all that great. If we can get him back on, we'll kind of follow up. But what I do want to find out is kind of the results, because really the purpose of this data collection, both from a knowledge point of view, do people understand measurement basics? And also from a practical point of view, do they understand how to use a portable arm? Do they know how to use a laser scanner? Do they know how to use whatever? Both of these come together to help them create the body of knowledge that they need in order to come up with the practical exams, the knowledge exams, and so forth, in order to in order to come up with the questions and so forth that they're going to ask as part of the certification.
Well, if we can't get Keith back, I'll say this, because I know we chatted with him before the show a little bit. He derived an 83-page survey. Results of this study that is available to members of the CMSC, but on the CMSC website, www.cmsc.org, you can access the summary of the data. And there's a lot of interesting nuggets just in the summary where you can go out. Now, you can access that through the article, because we ran the press release that you can link directly out to the CMSC website. From that press release, you can then access the executive summary. Really good stuff.
And I think we have,
okay, great.
Keith back on the, do we have you, Keith?
Yes, hello. It's I think it must be the bad weather across the Atlantic.
Okay. Well, really quickly here before we lose you, what were the results? Kind of what were some interesting things that you discovered this year at the measurement science? I'm sorry, during your measurement study.
Well, there was what was quite interesting. Some of the core principles again that we picked up in the past around the behavioural side, a lot of that wasn't actually picked up again. The guys sort of, I suppose, in a way, concentrated on taking the measurements and not thought about all of the other things that they'd got to do. I mean, we had a process, we wanted to see what would happen, and we had a complete repeat of the behavioural thing. And also there was an element of people, I suppose, in a way taking things for granted in the way in which they went and did things, not asking about the calibration, not asking about any uncertainty associated with it, not asking about the design requirements, because we had a standard test piece and we had a part off a motorcycle as well. So there was a lot of other questions that we were trying to see if people would come up with as part of the test, and that really didn't come out. Didn't score very highly in the positive way. That the numbers were very high in the fact they didn't do things.
Well, Keith, that's great, and I thank you for putting the point on that. While we were getting you back, Dirk and I chatted a little bit about the fact that the study is available on the CMSC website, and the summary is available for anyone who wants to go out and check that out at www.cmsc.org. So we got to move on. I apologize to you, and I apologize to everyone out there for our connection difficulties. But Keith, again, thank you for joining us. We'll be certainly revisiting this topic as we get into 2013.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Keith. Talk to you soon.
Yeah, right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right, that was Keith Bevan of the NPL, National Physical Laboratory in the UK, talking about the CMSC measurement study from CMSC 2012 in New Orleans, and we'll be talking about that again more as we go. Okay, we're going to move on now to our tech corner for this week. Another good tech corner. We've had a good run of tech corners here the last couple of weeks. This one comes from Nikon Metrology, and it is their shuttle picks. And Dirk is going to describe it for you right now. Take it away.
That's right. This is not a Buck Rogers ray gun. This is actually a Nikon Shuttle Pix P400R digital microscope. This is a high-end digital microscope from Nikon, so of course it has the renowned Nikon optics. Very good optics for those of you who've used their microscopes or cameras. You know exactly what we're talking about. A built-in programmable ring light, 20x zoom, and it's very portable and easy to use, and we'll get into the demo in just 1 second. I just want to show you just really briefly kind of what the camera looks like. We can switch over here to our other camera. This is a this is a digital camera. This captures microscopic images as still images, not video, so this is a still image camera for microscopic images. It's got an easy to use and flip up view screen. Got a couple of just basic controls, light intensity, zoom, another button that allows you to control which segments of the LED are turned on, and then some buttons just for navigation. Now, they call this the shuttle pix because it can be used standalone, just as you see it here. I've just got a little video cable coming out of it right now so you can watch. But it also can mount in a stand. I think if we can flip the picture, yeah, we got the picture up there on the screen if we can show that. We got a little stand that this goes with. So this can be mounted in a motorized stand or a manual stand. So you can use it as a desktop microscope, or you can take it out and use it just like you see here. Now, we're going to use it just as a portable. In order to do that, I need to put a little spacer standoff thing on the front. Remember, this is a microscope. Microscopes have very, very shallow depth of field. They also have a very short focal distance. So if you're going to try to use a handheld microscope at any kind of zoom factor, it's all going to be almost impossible to do it strictly handheld. So you need a little spacer that actually helps you kind of stand it off from the page. So we're just going to go over here. We'll switch to our actual video view. We're at 1x zoom right now, so you can see I've dropped this down. It's immediately in focus because of the standoff. It's keeping it just the right distance. And if I wanted to take some measurements, you'll notice that I have a little scale up on the screen right now. The shuttle pix comes with a number of different scales that you can use. I'm happy to using a crosshair. You could turn the scale off completely if you don't want to use a scale. And if you look in the lower right corner, I'm not sure if you can see it on your screen, it tells you the scale resolution. In this case, it's 3 millimeters. So each large tick on the scale is 3 millimeters. A smaller tick is half of that, or 1.5 millimeters. So I could go ahead and take measurements with this. I also have the option, let's say I can take a picture. If I snap that picture, I have the option of storing the scale with the picture or not, because sometimes for documentation purposes, if you're doing inspection, you might actually want to store the scale superimposed on the picture that's being saved. Now, the thing I really want to show you is something you wouldn't normally do. I'm going to zoom this in 20x. And this is pretty crazy because normally you would be nuts to try to do a handheld. I'm going to turn the light intensity up here a little bit too. You'd be nuts to try to do a handheld 20x zoom with a handheld microscope just because of the focus problems. And I'll show you what I mean. It's difficult even here. So you'll notice I'm trying my best to keep this in focus, but this depth of field is so shallow at 20x that is almost impossible. There's a lot of vibration. So if I wanted to take a picture, this would be really difficult except for an option that the shuttle pix has. What I'm going to do right now, in just a second, I'm going to pull the trigger on this. It's going to take 10 pictures in quick succession, and it's going to decide which picture is the best, and that's the one it's going to save. So let me just do this. Okay, I'm going to play back. And sure enough, even though I was wobbling all over the place, I was in and out of focus, out of those 10 pictures, there was one worth saving. It saved it. It threw away the other 9. And now I've got my picture back. Another thing I want to show you before we go to the software, notice now that I'm at the 20x zoom, in the lower right corner, my scale has changed. Before, at 1x, it was 3 millimeters. Now it's showing me my resolution on my scale is now 150 microns. Okay, so after I've taken a picture, that data is stored in an SD card. I can take that SD card, come back, put it in my laptop, and bring it into the shuttle pix editor. And we're going to take a quick look at the shuttle pix editor right now using our screen share. So it's kind of, the shuttle pix editor is divided into 4 areas. On the left-hand side, I've got my basic Windows-style folder navigation. If I open a folder, then down below, we have thumbnail images of all the images that are in that folder. I select the one I want. I'll just go ahead and select one here. And in the center, I've got the image that I want to look at. Underneath that, I've got some navigation tools to allow me to navigate around that image. And then on the right-hand side, I've got information about that image. If I was to take measurements, the measurement information would show up in the middle pane on the right-hand side over here. And of course, I can export any images, or I can export data as Excel format for later analysis if I want to do that. Now, one thing I want to do What you're looking at right now in this image, this is a period. This is a period on a laser print of a document. And this is the period at the end of a sentence. I'm interested in knowing how big are laser toner particles. This is a laser print, so obviously it's an electrostatic process. You're depositing bits of toner onto the page. So I'm going to zoom into this 500%. And I'm going to use my little navigation tool right here to just pick up one of those little particles. That is a single particle of toner. I can measure this a lot of different ways, but I think the easiest way is just to let's encapsulate it in the radius measurement tool. I'm just going to draw a circle around that and say, okay. I come over here. You can't read it probably, but it tells me that the radius of that circle is 6.8 microns. So the diameter is roughly 14 microns. So that particle is 14 microns in diameter. Now, the crazy thing about this is, I keep this in mind, if we can come back to the main camera here, the crazy thing about this, think about what I just did. That was captured handheld. I zoomed up to 20x. I got a field of view of maybe a millimeter. I'm resolving a 14 micron particle handheld. That is nuts. If you've ever tried to do that with a handheld portable microscope, you know that that is almost impossible to do. And yet, you can do it with the camera. Now, coming back to our software here real quick, one other thing that we could do, there is a function called 3D view. Christopher, do we actually have an example of an EDF file? Okay, let me tell you a little bit about EDF files. I'll leave that on the screen. One of the things you can do with the shuttle picks, if you're using it with a motorized stage, is you can do what's called EDF, or extended depth of field. And the way that works, and if we can come back to the, let's say the gauge camera here. Camera 3. There we go. The way EDF works is, let's say you have a stage and it's moving in the z-axis. Because it's a microscope, only one part of an object, let's say my hand is an object, we have the top, we have the bottom. With a microscope imaging, only one portion of this can be in focus at a time. So what EDF does is it moves from the top, it takes a picture, moves, takes a picture, moves, takes a picture. Each of those areas in no other area is in focus. It then comes back, stitches all those images together, and you get an image that is in focus from top to bottom. You now have a 3D image of the entire object. And if we go back to our slide there, you can actually see that what we're showing on the slide, you can see on the right-hand side, is taking multiple images. It combines those all together to create an image that is in focus from top to bottom. Now that you have a 3D image, you can do all sorts of crazy analysis with it. So that is it in a nutshell. Again, this is the Nikon ShuttlePix P400R digital microscope. Thanks to Nikon, Jeffrey Bork, for sending this to us. And if you want more information on it, there is a link below the player page. Thanks a lot.
Dirk, thank you. That is it. Yes, from Nikon Metrology, the ShuttlePix P400R digital microscope from Nikon Metrology. Good job, Dirk. And we've had some good, as we said, we've had some good tech corners lately. That was a good one, Dirk. It seemed like you enjoyed that, didn't you?
Yeah, you know, these little tools, I mean, we're actually getting more and more sophisticated tools on the show. I'm really appreciating that we're getting to show some, I mean, hand tools are really important. I think, you know, being able to show, you know, high quality, you know, micrometers and calipers and stuff, these are kind of the nuts and bolts tools, but also be able to show what's out there in terms of the higher end tools and what you can do with some of the new technology out there. Last week we had a 3D scanner. Today we actually had a microscope that is capable of producing 3D microscopic images. So it's pretty neat stuff.
Good stuff, good stuff. All right, well, thank you to Nikon for sending that along to us. Thank you, Dirk, for doing that. And thanks to everyone who contributed to the show this week. Keith Bevan of NPL and CMSC for talking to us through some of the Skype connection issues, talking to us a little bit about their measurement study, and Bill Evanson and Alan Austin as well for providing great articles for us this week. Well, that's the show. We'll be back at you next week with another week, our last week of the year of QDD.
That's right.
And our last QDL of the year is next Friday, a week from today. So look out for that. You know, before I wish you all a good weekend, just let you all know that our hearts and prayers certainly with everyone in Connecticut. Terrible tragedy today in Connecticut, so our hearts are heavy on that one. But things will get better. And we're looking forward to a good weekend, all of us. And we wish you the same, and we'll see you next week.
So long.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.